Hello, and welcome to the Maker's Room at the Greenwell Springs Regional Branch of the East Baton Rouge Parish Library. Today we'll be introducing you to our resident sewing machine, the Brother HC 1850. By the end of this video, you should be able to identify all the parts of the machine, as well as a number of basic sewing terms that we will be using in this training course. We'll start out over here on the side of the machine with the power cord, which is detachable, and the power button. Up here is the hand crank, or the hand wheel, which is for fine control of the sewing needle position. Just around the back of the machine, near the power port, is the port for the foot pedal. Because the Brother HC 1850 is a computerized machine, the foot pedal is optional, but it does give you finer control of speed. The cord there plugs in and leads down here to the foot pedal, which you press down to power on the machine. Up here we have the spool pin. It's currently locked down in the storage position, unlatches like this and folds out. This here is the spool cap, which is used to keep the thread spool on, like so. And this helps keep the thread from getting caught on the edges of the spool as the machine turns it. There are a total of 3 different sizes of spool caps for use with different sizes of spools. You want to make sure that the spool cap is always just at least a little bit larger than the size of the spool. Up here at the top of the machine, you can see the thread guides. Starting here, moving over to here. The thread guides are directions for how to thread your machine. We'll start over here with number 1. Now, this pictograph is 2 directions in once. This is the start of your directions for threading the sewing needle and for threading the bobbin spooler. We'll get to the bobbin spooler in a little bit, but you can see the top number here, the solid line, is our directions for threading the main machine. So we're going to hook our thread through this loop here. Trying to see if I can get you a better look at this little hook here, because it is a hook. And when you're threading, you want to pull it up and in there. You can pull on it this way again without it coming loose. So now we've got this hooked in here. We will come around here. As you can see over here, it comes around the back of this part and down this line. Coming back around the front, you can see the number 2 up here. We're going to pull it down here. This is the number 3. It has you come around this and back up. You can see the number 4 instruction right there. And what that is telling you to do is to bring it up to the right side, bring it around to the left, because we want to catch right around this metal bar in here. That's the tension guide. That keeps the thread at the correct tension for sewing. You can change the current tension on the upper thread by moving this dial here. The lower numbers are lighter tension, less tension. Higher numbers are higher tension. The different tensions are useful for different fabrics you are sewing, different threads you're using. But generally, you will be sewing right here in the bars, right in the middle at around a 4 tension. Now that we've got the thread around here through the tension bar, we're going to bring it straight down. You can see the number 5 here. And now we can thread the needle. So we've got our thread down here by the needle. And it's hard to see because the camera does not want to focus this closely. But there is an automatic needle threader that when you pull down all the way, there is a tiny hook that passes through the eye of the needle. You can loop that and pull it through and it will pull through a loop of the thread through the needle, which you can then grab and pull to thread your needle. Since we're here looking at the needle, this is how you change your needle out. There's a little screw here, which unwinds. There's a special key to tighten it up, and then you can just pull the needle out. Every universal sewing machine needle is just a little flat on one side. If you can see, it just sort of flattens out just on one side of the circle, of the cylinder. And that flat side goes to the back. And screws back into place. You want to push it all as far up as you can go before tightening it down so that your needle threader aligns and your thread aligns and everything's properly aligned. Now, the top thread is only half of the equation. Modern sewing machines use a dual thread system, one thread coming from the top and one thread coming from the bottom. The bottom thread is wound onto a small spool that drops into the machine like this, and this is called a bobbin. You can wind a bobbin using any standard spool of thread. The machine has a special feature for doing so. Up here at the top of the machine we have the bobbin winder. This is how you get the same kind of thread on your bobbin as you have on your spool. You will unthread your needle if you have it already threaded, or before you thread your needle to begin with. We're going to follow the dotted line this time. We're going to come up through here. We're going to go back around this. We're going to go under this piece, up, coming in between this metal bit and this circle. We are going to come around underneath this little gear here, and now we're going to thread it, send our thread through this little hole in the top of the bobbin, slide the bobbin onto the bobbin spooler, and we're going to slide this entire little spool here over to the right. This disengages the motor from the needle over here and connects it to this spool pin. You want to hold your thread up and out of the way. Do not let go of this or it will get tangled in the bobbin and you will ruin the bobbin and the thread. But once you've got it set like that, once you've got this clicked over, you will turn the machine on. I've got it on slow right now, and it's going up and down, winding thread onto the bobbin. I've already got a black bobbin, so I'm not going to wind much onto there, but it can go at full speed. It will wind almost all the way out to the edge, and it will stop when it is full. At this point, you would want to come and trim off this loose end so that you could let go, and it will not get tangled up in the rest of the bobbin. And then once you're done, you'll disengage it. You'll pull the bobbin off, bring the thread back out, you can cut it. Your machine actually has an attached thread cutter down around just here. This is a thread cutter here. So you can take your thread and pull, and it will cut the thread for you. That is also useful for when you've done sewing. You pull your fabric and thread right up here and pull it across to automatically cut a decent amount of thread off. The hole down here is called the bobbin casing. Once you've got your bobbin wound, you will drop it into the machine, into your bobbin casing, with the thread unspooling counterclockwise. You'll take the thread and bring it around this point here and up, and then you can bring it around this and use the thread cutter here to take off the excess. The machine will automatically pull up the bobbin thread. So put the cover back on, holding on to the top thread. You'll use either the needle lowering button, or you can use your hand wheel. I'm using the hand wheel because I don't have the machine turned on. That will hook your top thread onto the bobbin thread on the bottom and pull it up. Now you can take that thread and pull it out. Make sure it's passing under this. If you can see the teeth under here, these are called feed dogs. Feed dogs are part of the machine that will walk along the underside of your fabric, gripping it as you sew and pulling it across the bed, walking it from the front to the back in time with the movement of the needle. If you are working on something where you don't want it to move the fabric for you, you can come around the back of the machine here. Here's the needle threader, here's the front, here's the needle is back here. This is the back of the machine. And down here are the feed dog controls. Over here you can see these arrows indicate that the feed dogs are up. Over to this side, the arrows indicate that the feed dogs are down. And you can see those lower it and keep it down. When I switch it back over, they're not going to come straight up, but they will come back up once we start sewing. This metal plate here is called the needle plate, and it has a number of markings on it in inches and centimeters to help you keep the fabric even as you feed it through the machine, so that you keep an even seam along the edge of your fabric. You may have noticed that I haven't really talked about this piece yet. This is a presser foot. It keeps the fabric flat against the needle plate as you feed the fabric through. And it is detachable in the back. I'll flip you around to the back so that you can see this little lever on the back. And you push that in, clamp releases, and your presser foot drops off. To reattach it, you simply slide it under. Align this bar with a little notch up under here. Keep the thread out of the way. And push it up into place. And that will stay there until you hit your switch in the back again. And the reason it detaches is because there are different presser feet that are used for different purposes. This is your standard presser foot. This is what you'll use for most of your stitching. It's labeled with a J. The machine actually comes with a number of presser feet included. Those are stored down here. This piece detaches here. You can see it's hollow inside. There's a baggie. And in the baggie you have several accessories. This is a presser foot. Here's your button. Here's your bar. And this is for sewing buttonholes. The machine actually has several automatic buttonholes, and you will attach this foot. It's labeled you can just barely see it's labeled with an A there. And that is for automatic sewing of buttonholes. This bit here slides out according to the length of the buttonhole that you want to sew. And so that will just snap in. The next foot here is the G foot, or the overcasting foot. You can see the bar here in the middle and this guide here. This is used for finishing seams. When you sew a simple seam on the inside and you have raw edges still inside, you'll feed those raw edges in so that they line up along here, and the needle will sew back and forth over top of this bar and sew a nut around it, which will encase the raw edges of the seam so that they will not unravel in the future. The next foot we're looking at is the R foot, or the blind hem foot. The blind hem is a technique in which you use this foot in this particular stitch to make nearly invisible hem lines at the bottom of your pants or ends of your sleeves, bottom of the skirt, anywhere you have a hem. This foot also works well for edge stitching, lace, and fabric edge joining. This next foot is the M foot. This is intended for sewing buttons on. This will guide the button into place so that you can sew it in with your machine. This is the I foot, or the zipper foot. It can be attached right side or left side. So you can attach it either on this side or on this side so that your needle is positioned to sew extra close to the edge. It's specifically intended for sewing zippers, but it can be used simply for very close edge stitching as well. And that can go, again, to either side for ideal positioning. And this foot is the N foot. This is the open-toed monogramming foot. With the open toe and the wider opening here, This is useful for any stitches that go farther side to side, which is what you will use for most of your decorative stitches, heirloom stitches, and any of the alphanumeric stitches that you will be using. This brings us back around to the stitch selection screen. As you can see, there are a wide assortment of stitches available. These are pre-programmed as it is a computerized machine. It can use any of these stitches. And the way you choose your stitch is with the stitch selection up here. You change by 10s and 1s digits. So say I wish to use stitch number 17. I will bring this to a 1 and this up to a 7, and that will automatically stitch number 17. If I want to use say I want to do some overcasting and I want to use stitch number 7, which is an overcasting stitch. This, and this are all overcasting stitches. I will go back down, and now I'm on stitch number 7, which is an overcasting stitch. And you can see right up here, we changed from a J to a G, and that is indicating which presser foot you should be using for the stitch that you have selected. Any stitch that requires a G foot is going to be an overcasting stitch, though not all of the overcasting stitches are going to be using G feet, just these two. We've got the R foot for your blind hems, number 10 and 11. If you come down here, if we get into the decorative stitches, say number 61, which is some fancy rectangles, it will want the N foot or monogramming foot. Up here, we have a button for selecting which sort of stitch you wish to use. This is your standard stitches, this is your alphanumeric, these are your straight 00 through 99. Tapping over 1 goes to mirrored stitches, which for decorative stitches means it will do the same stitch the opposite direction. And if you want to do your alphanumeric stitches, if you want to do these, you'll push it up to that last light here with the A. We'll get more into working with the alphanumeric monogramming type stitches in a later video. Back around over on this side of the machine. On your stitch selection screen, you can choose what stitch you're using. 00, by the way, is the most basic of stitches. This is just your plain, ordinary, straight stitch in the standard position. However, even with just the plain, standard, straight stitch, you can vary it. These buttons here will change the length of the stitch. In other words, how far the needle travels before going in and out of the fabric again. You can make your stitches very, very short, which will make them exceedingly tight, but runs the risk of bunching or getting tangled, or you can make them quite long. Generally, with this longest stitch, this will be used as a basting stitch or a quick loose stitch to tack pieces of fabric together before using a more complicated stitch for sewing them down. You can also change the width of your stitch, or how far back and forth the needle goes between each stitch, or how to do zigzags. By default, it's 00, which means the needle does not move side to side at all between stitches. You can start increasing this. I believe this is in millimeters. And you can see the needle position moving just a little bit as I increase or decrease the stitch width. That will go all the way up to a 7. And as you sew, the needle will go back and forth. And at position 5 for your length, you're going to have a very wide, deep zigzag when you sew. We'll demonstrate that later on. If you want to reset your length and width to default, change which stitch you've chosen, and then just go straight back to the original stitch you want. You can tell that it's on your default width and length because there is this circle around these icons here. This here is the speed control. This controls how fast your needle moves, how fast the feed dogs are pulling your fabric through. This is great for really detailed pieces where you want a lot of control over what your needle is doing. Bring it all the way down to 1 and it cannot move very fast at all through the machine. This will allow you the most amount of control, but it does take much longer. You can increase your speed all the way up to 3. And this is a maximum speed. If you're using your foot pedal, you can still go very slow with it when it's on 3. You just have to be very careful with how much pressure you're putting on the foot pedal. This button here is the needle control. This will bring your needle up and up or down, up. When you're sewing, the needle will always stop in the down position, and you will press this button to bring it up so that you can pull your fabric out. This button here is your back stitch button. This reverses the stitch and brings fabric back towards you to the front. This is used for tying off or knotting your fabric. This secures the thread in the fabric. So you'll stitch forward a little bit, backward a little bit, and then continue stitching. If you're starting, when you come to the end, you'll go to the end, stitch back, and then finish stitching forward past the edge of the fabric. Because this is a computerized machine, you have the option of not using your foot pedal. So that if it's malfunctioning or you brought your machine elsewhere and you forgot to bring the foot pedal, you can still sew without it. It won't work unless the foot pedal is detached. Here I've taken the foot pedal off. I've taken it out of the port, detached it. And so now when I push this button, the machine will sew at whichever speed is selected. You do not have as much control over the speed because it will sew at this speed, or this speed. There are no in-betweens there. I could press this now and I'll get an E1 error. That's because my presser foot is up. There's a lever under here to lower or raise the presser foot, and the machine will not do anything if the presser foot is raised. But once you have that down, you could press this and it would go off and sew.